Hello, this is Dr. Sridhar Mote as part of the lecture series on contract management. Today I am deliberating the topics on deviations, variations, and extra works. I have around 35 years experience in industry with teaching this contract management as a subject as a visiting faculty to various premier and teaching and training institutes. So this session on is on deviations, variations, and extra works, which is very important topic in contract management with specific reference to construction contracts. I also authored a book on infrastructure contracts and management published by renowned publisher Asia Law House. This book is available Amazon at amazon.in. The glimpse of the book I am showing here with. The takeaways from this lecture are going to be basically to understand the provisions on deviations, variations, extra works in contracts with specific reference to infrastructure contracts. What are the possible causes for variations and their applicability? What are one meant by the terms? What is meant by deviation, variation, and extra work? What are the variation classes with case examples? Purpose of variations and deviation terms in contracts. Also, important points on variations. These are some of the likely takeaways from this lecture series. Obviously, a contract is entered with a predetermined scope of work which is agreed between the parties. It is most common in construction contracts that there are going to be deviations, variations, and extra works. We are using three terms differently here. Let us see what one by one by each term what does it mean and what one understands by such usage of terms. These words refer to and used to mean the works of out of scope. So there is a contract entered between the parties with predetermined agreed scope. Beyond that scope, these are occurring. So what each word signify normally used. Variation is a change in scope of works or modifications in contract. A variation means it is at variance. It is varying. Change in scope of works or modification in contract. Normally, deviation is a word used to refer the variation in quantities in BOQ, item rate contracts. There is a bill of quantities given with a detailed description of the item nomenclature, given a quantity also and with a stipulation of a quantity and item nomenclature against which the contractor will quote his rate for the unit rate method or item rate method. Now, if there is a variation in quantities, 100 cubic meters for concrete work item is stipulated, say that is a BOQ item. If the item quantity varies during execution from the stipulated 100, it can be more or it can be less, then the deviation in such quantity is referred as a deviation. Deviation in item quantities in BOQ, item rate contracts. Extra item, on the other side, is used for referring such items which are not incorporated in bill of quantities. In BOQ, various items are incorporated, and if any item is occurring beyond this BOQ items, that is called an extra item. Now, substituted item is such an item which is partly or fully replaced from the BOQ. There is a item given in the bill of quantities. If there is a new item, that is an extra item. But existing item of BOQ, either it is replaced partly or fully, that is called substituted item. New item with substitution in place of existing item, that is a substituted item. Now, there can be multiple causes why such variations or deviations, extra works, extra items occur. The possibility can be there may be uncertainty in subsoil characteristics. You assume or you investigate and estimate some quantity or some item, but while execution, that may be at variance, that may change. There can be variations in preliminary design to detailed design. Preliminary design is carried out on which the estimate is made. Now, in a detailed design, the assumptions of preliminary design may vary. So that causes during the execution based on the detailed design the variations. Often there may be changes in owner's requirements or specifications during the execution of work, which also triggers variations. Now, a scope is agreed and contracted for. There can be some extra works, additional scope of work, which was not originally envisaged and incorporated in the agreement. This also causes variation. There can be discrepancies, means ineffective planning, improper, inadequate planning, improper surveys or investigation, which are also likely causing the variations. There may be a possibility of uncertainty or impossibility to ascertain, estimate the work to be executed, which can be known only during execution. So that is also a possible cause. Normally, in infrastructure contracts of any type, there will be a variation clause generally. Each and every construction contract will have a variation provision incorporated in the contract. This variation clause will stipulate the terms and conditions for executing the variation and also how the valuation means when such variations or extra works or deviation in quantity are executed, what the rates are payable because it is not agreed in the contract, out of contract scope. So what are the rates or valuation amount to be paid for such extra? Again, such variation classes also may have terms on deviation limit. As we have studied, deviation is the item quantities. Deviation in item quantities in item rate contracts, BOQ quantities. For example, this is a term on a deviation limit specified in an agreement. For example, quoted rates are applicable up to plus or minus 25% of individual quantities in BOQ. Means in the BOQ 100 cubic meters is stipulated. The rates are same rates are applicable up to plus or minus 25%, means up to 75 cubic meters if it is minus side variation or up to 125 cubic meters, means if the item is in cubic meters then the same rate is payable. If there is a shortfall below 75 or spilling over 125, then extra rates may be payable. So that does it mean by the deviation, means the rates are applicable up to, quoted rates are applicable to up to such deviation limit. In CPWD, deviation limit is for foundation works 100% deviation is allowed because there can be some uncertainty in foundation quantities. So 100%, if 1000 cubic meters is specified is in foundation item, up to 2000 cubic meters same rate is applicable. Generally for superstructure items, 30% of deviation limit for individual quantities as just an example. Now, variation clause, whatever is stipulated in the contract, should be in detail. It should be explicit, means it should be in detail and it should state in the best interest of both the parties. If there is an inadequacies and it is not properly incorporated, then it may create ambiguities and doubts. Also, in most cases, this variation clause will define the authority of employer or engineer to order a variation. Means a contractor may refuse to carry the deviations, but employer has authority over the contract. If there is a term of the contract, parties have agreed and given the authority of the employer or engineer to order variations. Also, when such a clause is there, a contractor also might be requiring to propose a variation and can seek compensation if such variation clause is there in the agreement. Otherwise, it may be necessary to carry out variation. A proposal may be refused by the employer by the submitted by the contractor. So it also facilitates the contractor. Carefully drafted variation clauses gives an agreed mechanism for pricing also. Yes, parties have agreed for variation. Then what about the pricing? Rates to be payable, extra amount to be payable. One may claim something, but the employer may not. Contractor may claim something, employer may not agree. So there should be agreed valuation mechanism since this is not agreed in the agreement. Now, whether a particular work is categorized as extra work or not, or it is included as part of scope, that depends upon the terms and conditions of the contract and also types of the contract. As a case example, Class 12 of CPWD contract specify the terms for the variations and deviations under Class 12.1 to 12.5 for item rate contracts. In this, the authority of engineering charge to make variations is defined. Omissions, additions, or substituted items are dealt. Also, pricing mechanism, what rates or prices are to be paid such as extra works are defined in this. And when the extra work is executed, obviously it encompasses some extra time also proportionate to the overall contract price, right? Suppose 100 crores work is there. If you are executing 10 crores extra work, just for example, you are proportionately entitled for such extra time, just as an example. So proportionate basis. Now this also class revised rates, say market rates, whatever it may be, some revised rates are to be paid in excess of deviation limits. Means deviation limit exceeding the deviation limit specified, the rates are payable extra revised rates. Again, the FIDIC variation and valuation provision, as an example, as a case are dealt here. FIDIC Red Book 1999 stipulates terms for variations. Class 13 is on variations and adjustments. 13.1 right to vary. Anytime engineer prior to taking over and contractor is bound to execute the variations order unless he gives a notice. 13.2 is on value engineering. A contractor can also propose a variation and as a part of value engineering exercise, and variation procedure is given subsequently. Engineering instructions. 3.5 of the FIDIC Red Book gives the terms for the engineer to determine the variations proposals scrutinized. This 13.4 to 13.8 on payments, adjustments for changes in legislation and cost. Please go through the FIDIC Red Book, Class 13 in detail for better understanding. Only just a glimpse as a classes, subclasses are dealt here. Please go through for understanding in detail the variation provisions of FIDIC. Now, certain important characteristics and variations I want to emphasize here. In item rate contracts, BOQ nomenclature is of paramount importance since the nomenclature of BOQ items depicts the scope of work to be carried out. It is an item trade for the particular item, how to be executed. Based on the execution of that item trade, the contractor quotes his rate. So any operation beyond this nomenclature is an extra item. Now, there will be many disputes on applicability of variations. Also, not only the employer, it also, the variation clause facilitates the contractor to propose variation and claim compensation for the extra works. Now, when there are ambiguities, discrepancies in variation terms, then to interpret such ambiguities, hierarchy or precedence of documents in contract is interpreted, and there are good industry practices, golden rules for interpretation of such ambiguities, which is a big subject we will study subsequently. So these are all regarding the variations in contracts and how to interpret variation terms. If there is an ambiguity, how to interpret them. Applicability of variation is also a very important subject. So when some extra work is done towards the rectifications or incidental jobs connected with the main work, these cannot be categorized as extra work, so extra payments are not admissible. Often there may be difference of opinions and disputes between the employers and contractors, specifically related to EPC contracts on such issues. Only authorized variations ordered and approved by employer are eligible for payments. That's why most of the contract terms say that before executing a variation or an extra work, the contractor has to give a notification and seek the approval. Only authorized variations are payable. Unauthorized variations and unapproved variations, the employers may refuse to pay. Also, there may be some time limit specified in agreements. In case of extra work or in case of any deviation in quantities, you give a notification. There may be a directive to the contractor. And also, some terms may specify that written instructions should be obtained before executing. Now, no oral instructions. So, if any oral instructions are there, there should be confirmed in written before execution. Again, employer has authority and power under the agreement as per say a variation clause, but that power to order variations cannot be limitless and also purposeless. Means, say one can order variations only pertaining to the contract and also incidental to the main work. It doesn't mean that I have contracted for work at A and I can extend this work to another sphere. Means purposeless variation unconnected is not allowed. And also variation authority is not limitless. One cannot order variations unscrupulously, unjustified manner. In EPC contracts, the variation is a very big subject because in EPC contract, the scope is well defined. It is in not only a scope of work is given in detail, there may be some technical parameters, specifications, owner's requirements are specified in EPC contract. And a lot of disputes will come whether any particular work, whether it is a part of scope contracted for or not. Many cases, employers may refuse to pay extra, citing that extra jobs are included and incidental to ancillary and main scope. So there may be a lot of disputes on this. Again, there may be quantum merit claims. Means in such contracts, the merit is agreed. Yes, it is an extra job, but the valuation mechanism is not agreed. How much is the extra payable? Yes, extra work agreed, but how much is extra payable? There is no quantum mechanism. Valuation mechanism is not there in agreement. Often this also creates doubts on the quantification of variations. To sum up some of the important points on variations, extra rates are payable for only authorized variations. So it is imperative to give proper notices as per agreement conditions while before execution of variations, and time limit specified order the notification before executing or soon after occurrence of an extra item. The contractor may be required to give a notice as per the terms and conditions of the agreement, which should be strictly adhered to. And when a variation proposal is given together with the notification, it is better to submit the justification, rate analysis and details, and valuation methodologies as per agreement terms and conditions. If it is a market rate, give the market rate with all justifications. Substantiation. Burden of proof lies with the claimant. If one is claiming a variation rate, it is his duty to give all the relevant details and cost justifications. Again, incidental jobs and rectifications are not variations. Oral orders, if any, to be confirmed in writing. Extra time is permissible for execution of extra works if it is a major extra works. So it may not be not necessarily in proportion. The quantum may be proportionately less, but it may envisage more resources and also more time, which can be suitably justified with the details. So this is on variations and deviations out of scope works. For any support or help in contract management for infrastructure projects, you can reach me at this email ID. Thank you. Please keep watching this YouTube channel on contract management lectures. Please popularize this YouTube channel